I'd like to call the Redondo Beach Budget and Finance Commission to order for July 9th, 2020. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Chun?
Here.
Commissioner Samples? Can you turn your mic off, on, sir? I see you.
This is confusing. Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Woodham?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Nguyen? Absent. Let noted as absent. Commissioner Conroy? Absent. And Chair Solomon?
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. We have our roll call. We don't see a flag, but we'll stand and salute to a flag if we can, please.
Yeah, I've lost my person that would put up the flag, so sorry.
All right. Go ahead and begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nice flag.
Thank you, everyone. It was there. Do we have the order of agenda tonight? Is there anyone who would like to make a change to the order of agenda? Seeing no takers, please call for a motion to approve the order of agenda.
So moved.
And we have a second.
Second.
We'll do a roll call vote then, as we're doing this via Zoom. Commissioner Woodham?
Yes. Aye.
Commissioner Chun?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much. Do we have any blue folder items tonight, Vicki or Eleanor?
We have none.
No blue folder items tonight. And then we have our consent calendar. I don't see any items on the consent calendar. Is that accurate?
There are two
No,
items on the
there-
consent calendar.
Oh, 2 items on the consent calendar. Beg your pardon there. We have the approval of affidavit of posting for the meeting tonight for July 9th. Do we have a motion to approve the affidavit of posting, please?
Motion to
So
approve.
moved.
And a second, please?
Second.
And we'll go ahead and do a roll call. Oh, we'll do a roll call for the F1, affidavit of approval of posting. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Chun?
Aye.
I vote yes as well. Thank you. Next item on the consent calendar is F2, approval of the meeting minutes from the May 28, 2020 special meeting of the Budget and Finance Commission. In reviewing the minutes, did anyone have any changes to anything contained therein?
No.
Seeing no takers, we'll get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the May 28, 2020 meeting. Can we get a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Before
We'll
you
do a
take the roll call
vote.
vote, I just want to confirm there are no public comments received for these two items.
Oh, thank you. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
very much.
Certainly.
Do a roll call vote then. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Chun?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much. I don't see any items on our excluded consent calendar, which brings us to public participation on non-agenda items. This is usually limited to 30 minutes as we're in our Zoom meeting. There will be no speakers at the podium, but each speaker will be afforded 3 minutes. It's limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker is permitted to speak only once or participate only once. Do we have any public participation comments, please?
No, Chairman, we have none. We have none.
Okay, thank
And
you.
we also have no e-comments submitted as well.
Okay.
Well, that's it.
Thank you. Is that for H1 then, Vicki?
For non-agenda items, yes.
Or non-agenda? Okay.
Correct.
That will bring us to the items continued from our previous agenda, which is the discussion and possible action regarding formation of a subcommittee to review the city CalPERS liabilities with possibility of adding a review of city's workers' compensation costs. We have our city finance director, Marnie Ruland. Do you have a presentation or something you'd like to speak to on this item, please, Marnie?
Sure, I was just going to let you know that this item is continued from your last meeting. You had hoped to have more commissioners present for the decision. And to avoid the Brown Act requirements, your subcommittee would need to be less than your 4-member quorum. And subcommittee would need to have a duration of less than 1 year. So tonight, you need to select members, determine a scope of work, and whether or not that will include workers' comp, and then pick a duration of time. And then when we get to the calendar too, we could put when there would be a report back from the subcommittee.
Okay, thank you, Marnie. This was something that I had brought up and we discussed shortly at our last meeting. I wanted to please bring it back when Commissioner Johnson could join us also. I know he expressed an interest and concern over CalPERS obligations. I considered, or I wanted to consider also and acknowledge Commissioner Chun's comments from the last meeting, where essentially our CalPERS obligations are what they're going to be. There's not much that we can do to modify, change, or influence what that obligation is in our capacity. My thoughts are, in that regard, what I was hoping to find is beyond examining the CalPERS liabilities and drilling down on them, part of our ability as a board, as a commission, is to study different sources of revenue and make recommendations to the city council. And what my thoughts were is that beyond the scope of it analyzing our CalPERS liability would be to consider what other sources that we may be able to suggest to the city council as a means of meeting those responsibilities in the future. Commissioner Woodham has mentioned some of these things in the past where we had a discussion about the sales and use tax that didn't end up going through at the city council. The firefighter study, whether or not we would go to a county model. The city has examined or discussed very briefly in the past things like allowing for cannabis retailers within the city. So beyond just simply the examination of what our liabilities might be and if there are any alternatives, I would hope that we would have a subcommittee that could study or make suggestions of alternative sources of revenue, such as the ones I've mentioned, if not others, to bring back to the council, or that there may be some that a subcommittee comes up with on their own to bring to a discussion within our commission that could then make recommendation to council to discuss. So those are my thoughts on why I thought it was important to have a subcommittee to study this, to have the opportunity to drill down when we're not limited by time within the commission meeting, not straining the resources of the staff in preparing reports for the subcommittee. Some of the recent developments have certainly put pressure on analyzing this. Ironically, CalPERS in February or shortly before the market implosion or uncertain times due to COVID, they eliminated their tail risk hedging that they had in place for years of market downturns and market crashes. The CIO of CalPERS is talking about increasing their exposure and taking on more leverage. And we all know that in the event that CalPERS results are unable to meet expectations, then they come back to the members' cities and knock on the door and ask for more money. So considering what's going on at CalPERS, considering what's going on with the economy, considering we want to be creative and use the advantages of the brain power in the room, I would strongly encourage or request to encourage the commission to consider creating this ad hoc committee, that it be for a period of, say, 9 months, comprised of 3 members, if 3 of us are willing to go ahead and donate their time, additional time in examining the CalPERS liabilities and then possible alternative sources of funding or financing to meet those responsibilities, and bringing that before the commission and then up to city council. Those are my thoughts, and I open the floor up to comments from the commission. I don't see any hands up, but welcome any comments.
If I may mention too that Commissioner Conroy joined the meeting at 6:42 p.m.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Commissioner Chun, please.
Yeah, so my comments, similar to last meeting, is in general, we have to raise revenue. So it's very difficult to raise revenue. So that's the first thing. Second thing you mentioned is CalPERS is increasing their leverage or borrowing. So that's an option. Basically putting out more debt, and then I think that's challenging. I don't necessarily think that the city is in favor of adding more debt currently right now. Also, the majority of small municipalities that have had issues with PERS liabilities is really, they basically just cut back services, everything down to the skeleton, because it was too hard to negotiate contracted employees with the unions. So unless you can redo the unions' contracts, which is very difficult, there's not much you can do aside from looking at what are the biggest cost cuts we can do at a city, which is going to be extremely painful. So that's just my assessment. I think in general, it's just very difficult to do that unless you can find a fast revenue source. In this current environment, unlikely. And so separately from that, I will not be able to join that potential smaller commission, given that my term is up this year. So those are my comments.
Well, you could always be reappointed. Have you applied? I hope you've applied to be reappointed, because it would be a shame to lose you. Commissioner Samples had his hand up, and then Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, one thought comes to mind, and I've heard it from our police chief on a couple of occasions, and he's talked about how he is managing some of his basically his CalPERS exposure and his workers' comp exposure by his hiring practices and methodology of staffing. I think it would be worth exploring that and seeing if that's a best practice that can be moved to other agencies in the city. And maybe there is a way, without laying people off, that we can find a way to somehow start managing this rather than letting it continue to run rampant. Just thought.
Commissioner Johnson?
We should acknowledge Commissioner Wynn has joined. Hi, Min.
Thank you. Welcome.
So, Chair Solomon, even since last time we've been together, I think the landscape on this has changed, and there is a gigantic turmoil coming in the pension system that is going to be caused by factors that make us look beyond a speck of dust floating around a room, and those involve, because we can't think about Redondo Beach singularly, but CalPERS. So we have these efforts to defund the police departments. In some areas, they could grow so extreme that entire police departments would be disbanded, and in effect having a different type of community servicing. And while those are less likely, just watching the news in the past hour, there's been discussions of having limits on how many public service, that's fire and police professionals, can resign, because there's so much stress on these people in these jobs that there's, I wouldn't say there's mass retirements, but people are concerned about the future quality of their jobs. They're concerned about the environments they're working in, and they're wondering if they should retire now while there is such a plan and get out. And I don't know how CalPERS has recovered. We've got a little speck of a $2.5 billion pension plan at my company, and we have recovered 99%. We do not take the kind of risks that CalPERS takes. And I just think there's so much funding turmoil that's going to be going on. And I agree with Warren that, you know, when we've seen people come and present, and there's organizations that will help you. The unions are in control of the pension plans, and the pensions are obligations that have been viewed as untouchable by the courts. So attacking it from that angle is, I would have agreed with Warren a month ago or 6 weeks ago. Now we're going to see such turmoil in CalPERS. I hate to say that we should sit back and watch what happens, but that's probably the best we can do. I think we could start up a subcommittee and spend a lot of effort and only be talking to ourselves and delivering a report. And so that's the base of how I feel about it. Over.
Okay, Commissioner Woodham, did you have a question?
Not a question, just a comment. I don't disagree with anything that Warren said. This is a difficult issue, and our options are limited. But the thing that has resonated with me since the discussion on this started, and since I saw it first mentioned at City Council, is that I don't sense that City Council, at least in the comments that I've heard, are as read into this issue or as acutely aware of this issue. Maybe they are, but we've got a situation here where the expenses are going to increase pretty substantially over the next 10, 11 years. And we've just gone through a pretty excruciating budget exercise when our revenue was reduced by $7 or $8 million. That produced a lot of turmoil in budgeting. And we're going to have that in spades over the next 10 years. So if we assume that the budget is relatively close to being as efficient as possible right now, then those kinds of expenses over the next 10 years are going to be difficult to deal with. So I think we as a commission should address that, whether we have a subcommittee to do it or whether we simply allocate time at one or two meetings to look at various issues. I'm not sure which of those is best, but I think we're the ones who should be front and center on this analysis. So I would certainly support either a subcommittee or carving out of our time to discuss the problem. This is I think a significantly more important issue than some of the things we're looking at on the annual calendar, but that's just my opinion.
I think it's something that it's a worthwhile to be prepared or to be in a position to act rather than come back and need to act. That if we had a subcommittee created to be able to analyze some of these issues, as Commissioner Johnson mentioned, the ground keeps shifting beneath our feet. I look at it as an advantage to have a couple of the commissioners in a position or prepared on a subcommittee such as this to quickly put their heads together, respond, analyze, take a little bit of the pressure off of staff, because if we bring it back in the staff in our budget meetings or commission meetings, it's taking a lot of staff time in order to put together a report that maybe could have been done, or some of the ideas could have been presented to staff and say, here's some different ideas, save them a little bit of research time, and then be in a position or be prepared to act in an uncertain situation. I look at the disaster council that was formed at the city, that the city has. That disaster council was in place for a couple of decades, but it wasn't formed. But when we needed it, the city manager was able to immediately act on it, in that they had the authority with the mayor to go ahead and bring it before council, and it was ready to go. So I look at it as a situation where I don't see the downside of a couple of commissioners, if they're willing to do so, go ahead and not just look at what's happening at CalPERS, but to think about other revenue sources that can help fund this gap that we're experiencing. So that's why I'd rather have it available and have people be able to look at it without having to bring it back at a monthly meeting and maybe waiting. If we wait too long, is that critical? No, but I'd rather be proactive than reactive, is the way I look at it. Commissioner Samples had a question, please, and then Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You bring up something here that, first of all, I agree with what you just said. Being in a place where we can have a core group that can look into this and prepare material for the commission without overly burdening staff, I think is a good idea. But it also strikes me that there are probably large pieces of this discussion that have been and are probably continuing to go on in closed door session with the city council, the labor unions, and other sources. And I wonder if we put a subcommittee together, will we be able to have access to any of that information so that we can actually make some reasonable comments or provide reasonable thoughts back to the rest of this commission? Or are we just going to be dealing with publicly available material?
I suspect that those items that are in closed session would not be available to us, no. Either Eleanor or Vicki, if you want to weigh in on that, I don't believe that closed session items would be available to a subcommittee.
No, they wouldn't.
Okay.
I'm not privy to.
Okay, there you go. And there you have it. So closed session items would not be.
So we may have limited ability to actually weigh in on some of these.
Well, I respectfully disagree in the sense that not having that information available, you can read what's on the agenda in the closed session items. There are only a limited number of things that are closed session items, such as union negotiations, but that doesn't preclude you from investigating other ideas related to our exposures and possible revenue sources. It simply means that in the time when we're negotiating with the unions, you don't know what they're negotiating with the union. But we right now have union contracts in place with, it's not just limited to police and fire that you see there all the time. There are a number of different employee unions within the city. And then once those agreements are made, that is publicly available information. That appears on the calendar, the agenda for approval. So it's only those items with the unions that are in the process or active negotiations that you would not be or have available to you. Commissioner Johnson, please.
So I just wanted to comment that I certainly agree with Commissioner Woodham's observation. We as this group have been studying the upcoming costs and liabilities for a number of years, and we've seen this looming problem. And then this year we've seen the cut in revenues. And I agree, I think, Commissioner, maybe where you're looking forward is it's not going to be better next year. It's very likely that tourism will stay down. The infection rates are out of control right now. If you see, United Airlines is going to lay off half of their employees. because there's no forecast to return travel. So a lot of these revenue sources are going to remain low. So I agree with Commissioner Woodham pointing out that it's not just the pension cost, but it's the problem as a whole that could be really catastrophic for the city in the next year to 2 to 3 to 5 years. And then Chair Solomon, I also agree with you. Of course, I have no objection to our group forming a subcommittee to work on this. And I think, an easy way to approach whether that would be possible or not would be to ask if there are 3 members who have the bandwidth and the desire to take on this problem. And I would be first to say that I don't have the bandwidth to join that group right now.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to put other people on the spot, but if we don't have the anti-quorum of 3 who have the desire to take on the problem, then it's a moot question.
Very fair point. Commissioner Conroy?
Thank you, Chair Solomon. I just want to touch on a couple points. I agree with Commissioner Johnson as far as it being it's a two-pronged issue at this point, where we've got reduced revenues combined with ever-increasing pension costs. We've seen this growth in pension costs for a number of years, and it doesn't look like there, in my opinion, any end to it. And each year it becomes a larger and larger percentage of our budget, and it's only a matter of time, and not a lot of time, before it's untenable. And I know to an extent there's contracts in place, and there's only so much that can be done. But in my opinion, this requires all the study that people can contribute, because it's, again, in my opinion, the largest issue affecting our budget in the current and the future years. Something like you mentioned, people as far as having the bandwidth. This is something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, and one of the big reasons that I even wanted to be a part of this commission. So it's something that, when we get to that point, I would be very interested in participating in. And my only concern is, Chair Solomon, you mentioned as far as finding additional sources of revenue, and I think that's certainly part of the equation. I'm just, I guess, wondering. I'm more than eager to put in the work. I just hope that there's a receptive audience for it, whether it be through presentation to City Council or to city staff. I guess my point is, I hate to put in a bunch of work, put together a big comprehensive report, and then have it just be, looked at and then not affect any change. I guess a lot of that depends on how, what the report is and what type of things it provides for consideration. But I just hope that we have a receptive audience. That's all.
Commissioner Woodham, you had a comment?
Yeah, I guess we have to assume that we're going to have a receptive audience one way or the other, because this is not an issue that we have a choice in. As I understand the issue and the numbers over the next 11 years, if the numbers on the last budget information that Marnie sent are still in place, we're going to end up spending something in the range of $6 million per year over the next 11 years, just to cover our unfunded liability. And we don't have a choice. So there has to be, the audience has to be receptive. We've got to find ways to either increase revenue or reduce other expenses by that combination of $6 million per year. And that's going to be the real issue. I agree with you, Commissioner Conroy, that we need to have a receptive audience, but I think it's fair to assume that we already have that. The City Council doesn't have a choice. these expenses have to be paid. So just a question of where we get the money.
I think a person who's standing in a burning house can't afford to ignore the fireman standing behind them. Commissioner Chun had a comment.
Yeah, so further comments, right? I think I mentioned it in the last meeting or a previous meeting, right? So to increase revenue, redo the waterfront, redo South Bay Galleria, cut the red tape, allow it to be built within reason. Cut services. Nobody wants to touch all those top 5 sacred cows. People, let's talk about cutting services. We really want to talk about it, right? Already Seaside Lagoon is no longer going to be operation this summer because it's at a loss. So we got to talk about those type of services that nobody wants to talk about to be potentially permanently, at least for a few years, cut. So, I mean, it's theoretically pretty simple, but there's not a lot of political will in terms of tackling it from that standpoint, the revenues or the cost cuts. The other option is with employee costs. Well, going forward, how about having no unionized employees? That's a big option. A lot of private corporations got rid of their pension plans and just had 401k plans. So that's for new hires. That could be in the contract. That should be heavily considered. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Conroy.
Yeah, just briefly, based on what Commissioner Chun said, I agree wholeheartedly. This is a big problem, and it's going to take some big work, some big effort, and the sacred cows. I guess I just want to ask the group to confirm. Redondo Beach is a charter city, if I'm not mistaken, and I think because of that, there's certain things that we can put on the ballot, meaning we can leave it up to the citizens to weigh in on certain things, like some of these cuts to some sacred cows. I think they have a voice in that, and maybe if someone can expand on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, there's a number of different things that you can do with my limited base here. There are times when the council has put an advisory vote on the ballot. Say, well, this is something that we feel is necessary to do, but we like the public to go ahead and weigh in. There are, when you're talking about bond measures or other revenue raising measures, different standards of voter approval that you need, where with a certain type of bond issue, you need 66% or more, but there might be something else where you'll have a 50% or more threshold. You had the city issuing lease revenue bonds in the refinance of the harbor, which was a way of not having a public vote. So the answer to your question or query is really an all of the above, in that depending upon what the recommendations are in order to improve revenue, and Commissioner Chun makes a great recitation of some of the different ideas that are out there. There are other things to consider that a subcommittee might consider and to bring forward. And it'd be nice to have it crystallized into a report like you described. Say, here are options 1 through 10. Here is the SWOT analysis of options 1 through 10. And have that go before the commission. And some of those things in the SWOT analysis are going to be more onerous than others. The idea of, like Commissioner Chun mentioned, of employee costs or union costs, and some of those things that he well described as lacking political will in some situations. So that all goes into the analysis. But we never really seem to have the time at our meetings to really get into this. You know, tonight maybe being a little bit of an exception, we're touching on some great ideas, but it seems like when we have our meetings, we start to get into that and we get to talk about it at a very surface level, and then we want to bring it back at a future meeting, and circumstances, things come up, there's staff time, there's vendors that have to come in. You know, one of the things that was mentioned in the staff report tonight was that for the workers' compensation, we would have had to pay the vendor to come back in again in order to do a deeper dive discussion of it. So this, to me, crystallizes the reason why I'm describing an idea behind a subcommittee to, if people are willing to volunteer the time, put this in, work towards bringing it to a commission meeting, and then making that recommendation to council. But Commissioner Johnson, to go back to what he said, makes a very valid point. If we don't have the 3 people who are here that have the bandwidth to do that, and it's not an absence of wanting to do it, it's really the bandwidth to do it, then no, it's not going to happen. I would be willing to volunteer that time to do it. I would really like to see this happen, and if it takes me being the 3rd person, I'll do it. I'm not going to go around the room and ask everybody because I don't think that's a fair way of doing it. But if I think that this is important enough that I would be willing to go ahead and volunteer my time for it.
I would agree with that, and I would also volunteer time. So, I mean, we've got 3 folks right now who said they would be willing to do it. So we have the people to start it and see how it goes.
I think that's a great group. I think that's 3 people who have the desire, who have a lot to add to it, and who all have different perspectives. We have, obviously the chair is very knowledgeable about city operations, and the others have their own set of skills. So it's a good group.
Hey, one quick question, if you'll allow me. I had asked Marnie about this. I only know a couple of people on the commission well. It would be helpful, I think, to all of us in these discussions if we had a little more information about the background of the folks we're sitting here looking at right now. For instance, if Commissioner John has indicated he has a pension background, I'm sure that there are others who have books of knowledge that would be helpful to us. Is there some way that we as a commission can simply exchange that information? I mean, it's sort of a short bio, 1 paragraph for saying what we've done and what our work is. And I think that would be helpful for the future working of the commission if we knew that.
Marnie, does that create problems with the Brown Act, having the commissioner's bio?
I was thinking more as opposed to something written, more just here at the meeting verbally.
Okay, if people are willing to do that, I'd be willing to do something like that to give a brief background of different layers or areas of experience, work experience or expertise otherwise. That's something that I don't know that we would have to agendize. I don't think so, but what do you think about that, Marnie?
It seems to me that it's part of the current discussion with the help of determining who has the background most qualified for such a subcommittee.
Okay, beyond the background and the willingness to engage in the committee itself.
I think
I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Woodham.
The 3 people we're talking about now certainly have the willingness and I'm sure the background to do it. I'm just thinking as far as this issue and other issues that come along, it would be helpful for all of us to know what each of us have done and what our focus has been over the last few years. That would just be helpful. So to that extent, if we can do that at a next meeting and just plan on each person taking 60 seconds to give that verbal coverage, I think it'd be helpful. It would be, at least to me. I don't know what the rest of you think.
Well, I think it's worthwhile. It's always good. We find out some things about each other and ourselves when we do something like that. I know that we all do have our separate strong skill sets, and it's really nice to see that come out in some of the meetings. I rely upon that skill set for someone like with Commissioner Johnson. We're reviewing the Moss Adams report and his background and some of the things that we covered there. I agree with you. I think it's really helpful. to lean on some of our experienced and skilled members in their particular areas. As far as the subcommittee is concerned, are we comfortable with the idea? Let's start with something simple, that it would be over a period of 9 months. It has to be for less than a year. The reason that I suggest the 9 months is that it would be something that would end before the next budget cycle. So we would be able to get into it here towards March and April of 2021 for those of us who were still on the commission at that time. It would then be worthwhile or kind of feather into the budget discussions that would be coming up at City Council when they're talking about what their options are. If you think that a shorter period of time would be more efficient, then I'm open to the idea of doing it at a shorter period of time as well. But I think 9 months would be a good chunk to be able to dive into the issue.
Yeah, I agree. 9 months sounds good.
Commissioner Samples?
So, this subcommittee is not restricted to simply coming up with one report that they would deliver at the end of whatever this period is that we're talking about. There could be interim reports, interim discussions that this subcommittee could bring forward on a monthly basis, correct?
We could do that. Time permitting at our meetings, the subcommittee could, if we agendized it, have a discussion about the information that was discussed or received. Am I understanding that correctly, Marnie?
Sure, if you're all in agreement, we can put such an item on each agenda.
Okay, so my comment then would be, let's consider running this all the way to the end of next fiscal year, June 30th. That way, if anything comes up during the budget cycle, this subcommittee may have expertise that they can weigh in on and do further investigations.
Well, it has to be, the duration could not be for 1 year or greater. So
Right.
I don't know if that's a calendar days or calendar months. Vicki, if you know that, are you aware?
I'm sorry, I do not know that. But if you do that for the fiscal year, it would not be a full year now because we've already entered into the full fiscal year.
Okay, so the June 30th date, it might be calendar days.
Right.
I don't have an objection to that. And then things could be studied otherwise. Simply that during that period of late May and June, staff is incredibly busy. Really, even before that, staff is incredibly busy. The commission, we're incredibly busy, have a lot of material on our agendas as we're going through those things. Our joint meeting with Public Works, for example, is always at the end of April when we do that. Then you've got the City Council, which is reviewing a lot of material already at that point. So I don't object to it being available to go through that date. I think that's a good idea. I don't know how much of it will be through there, but certainly we could do it through the end of fiscal 2021.
Just thought, and I think it gives some flexibility in case there is reason for them to weigh in, or there's an opportunity for more information. Doesn't mean that they have to work during those last 3 months. We'll make it paid vacation if they'd like.
Okay.
And that's a great idea. It provides the flexibility, and if the committee concludes its work earlier, then it concludes earlier.
Okay, that's great. As far as the scope of it is concerned, then certainly we're talking about CalPERS, we're talking about alternative funding sources. The other thing that was listed on here is a possibility of discussing workers' compensation costs. Commissioner Samples, I think that was something that you had brought up as wanted to discuss.
Well, the only reason that I brought this up again last month and asked that it be included as part of this discussion is because we were actually tasked by the City Council almost a year ago to look into some of those costs related to the fire department discussion. We weren't able to get the information that we thought was important at the time, and so it's still kind of hanging there as an open issue. I'm not sure that the original intent of the city council and our original task on that really remains as it was. But I think it's still something that's worth considering and making part of this subcommittee's responsibility. And once again, going back to what I said earlier, part of that has to do with comments made by Chief Kaufman about how his workers' comp costs have been reduced based on some of his hiring and training practices. So there may be something worthwhile in here. I have no idea what that might be. I have a completely open mind on it. I think it's worth having on the list and giving someone a chance to look at it in a little bit more detail.
Okay, as noted in the staff report, it seems that the item was not brought back to us as part of a cost issue. It's noted here that the outside consultant, if I understand this correctly, were they available to meet without additional charge to the city? It seems like no, they were not available to meet without additional charge. Is that correct, Marnie?
Not available.
So we were a little bit frustrated by purpose there as far as the cost of the consultant coming back and discussing it with us.
Well, for sake of discussion, the city received a new workers' comp assessment. And even though we received a new actuarial report, this question that we asked last year that the consultant was not able to provide to us without additional cost, that question was not included by the city in the new recasting of the workers' comp analysis. So I'm kind of surprised if they were contracted to do the work. This sounds like it would have been a fairly small add-on based on what we were asking, but it was not included. So just for point of information.
Okay, is there any objection to including discussions of workers' compensation within the subcommittee's purview? So then,
No.
As per Commissioner Sample's request, we can include that as far as a purview. Just as a note, if there is another member of the commission that wants to be working on the subcommittee, I volunteer my time, but I'm not stuck with the idea of insisting that I participate. If somebody wishes to participate, then I'd be happy to step aside for that. I leave it up to other people. If they want to volunteer for that, then that's great. I'm flexible as far as participating or not participating is concerned. Any other ideas of scope for the subcommittee? Beyond the CalPERS, the alternative revenue sources, and the workers' compensation discussion. Well, seeing no other hands, it seems what we have here is a subcommittee of 3 members that will participate in discussing those items for a period that will not exceed through the fiscal year June 30th, 2021. Absent any other discussion, I'd like to go ahead and call for a vote on the creation of the subcommittee.
Is that a motion to create?
Yes, please.
Chairman Solomon,
Yes, ma'am.
we need to ask the public.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Is there public comment for this item, please, Vicki?
Just refresh the screen. No, sir, there are none.
Yeah, and then
Thank you
for
for the
the
reminder.
Zoom participation.
I beg your pardon?
And then for Zoom also, because we're using Zoom for participation for the public also, but we have none.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Commissioner Conroy has a comment.
Well, more of a question, because I had some technical difficulties getting in here into the meeting on time. Who are the 3 commissioners that we're currently considering for the subcommittee?
At this juncture, it seems it would be yourself, if you're willing, Commissioner Woodham, and myself, unless there were another commissioner that wanted to jump into my place, I would be willing to cede that position. Any other comments? Your comments from the public have been completed. then we'll go ahead and do a roll call. We'll make that motion, and do we have a second for that motion, please?
Second.
We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote then, please. Commissioner Wynn?
Yay.
Commissioner Conroy?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Chun?
Aye.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you.
I'm sorry, just in case the public didn't hear either, I didn't get the vote for Mel Samples, Commissioner Samples.
That was aye.
Oh, yes, sir, thank you. So it's unanimous, thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is item J1, a discussion and possible action regarding the Budget and Finance Commission's tentative calendar for the remainder of 2020. Marnie, did you have some comments here, please?
Sure. In your agenda packet is a calendar of the Budget and Finance Commission meetings for the remainder of calendar year 2020 with tentative topics of discussion for each minute or each meeting. So the topics come from a few sources. First are regularly scheduled items like the quarterly treasurer's report and the CAFR. Second are referrals to the commission from the city council, like the self-insurance program fund, which was part of their budget adoption that they just did. And third are the commission's referrals to staff, like the quarterly budget updates and internal controls update and fee waivers. So I believe all your referrals, with a couple of exceptions, are included on the calendar. The exceptions are, as you were just discussing, the workers' comp issue, because we were just down to should those workers' comp costs drop off during the 10-year projection in the analysis of the Fire County study. So that's not really applicable any longer. And as you mentioned, we could not get anybody to address that issue without a charge to the city. Expiring contracts is another referral we received. And that one is a very decentralized process, so there's nothing really to share on that. But the commission had asked for a list of upcoming expiring contracts. So we will work on putting something together and just distributing it to you outside of the agenda process. And then vehicle lives, that has been talked about by the commission, and it also was included in the city council's budget adoption, and they asked for that to be included with the mid-year report. And since you as a commission get that same mid-year report, we'll also include the vehicle life cycle policy in your mid-year report. We're anticipating that mid-year will be in February of 2021. So if you want to do any rearranging of the topics, one thing we'll add to each month is a subcommittee report. Or if you noted anything else that was missing from the calendar, we can add that as well. I plan to include the calendar with any updates that come up on each future agenda. My plan currently is just to put it on the consent calendar just so you see it, but we don't need to discuss it each time. Of course, if there's something you do want to discuss, as it comes back each month, you can always pull it from the consent calendar. And
Okay, thank you, Marnie. So mid-year, we're thinking is not here over the course of the next several meetings, but would be February 2021, you said?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a way, as far as topics are concerned and something that we just mentioned, can we how do we let the council know? Because we were tasked to discuss the workers' compensation by council, to let them know that there will not be a follow-up or information back from us on that topic?
How about, because workers' comp is part of the self-insurance program fund, how about if we, and they would like a report back from you on that, how about if we include it in there?
Okay, I'd be open to that idea so that we could be responsive to the council's request, and if that isn't too much additional staff time for you, then I'd be up for that.
Okay.
Any members of the commission have any other comments? Commissioner Samples has his hand up.
Yes, I just, Marnie, just a quick question. In August, one of the topic items is salary adjustments for mayor, city council, and city attorney. Those are all elected positions. Is there some reason that treasurer and city clerk are not included there, or
Yes, you do those at a different time. You're tasked with doing these as or preceding an election.
Okay.
So that those applying to run for the position know what the salary is going to be. So these are the ones that have that are up for election in March of 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Marnie, as part of that discussion, are the other ancillary benefits included? I don't want to go too far astray here, but just curious. Such as cell phone, and car compensation.
I'm trying to recall the last time it came before you, whether that was included. If I recall correctly, a total compensation amount was included, but I don't know that it was broken down that finite.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments regarding the tentative budget calendar for 2020? Do we have any members of the public who have commented on this item?
We have no Zoom comments.
And none on e-comment either, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
They move to approve the calendar as displayed.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, great. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote then, please. Commissioner Chun?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Nguyen?
Aye.
Commissioner Conroy?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
And do we still have Commissioner Woodham? I think we may have lost
A
Commissioner.
notification that his connection died.
Yeah, we've lost him. He's not present.
Okay, Commissioner Woodham not voting. Thank you. We can move on to the next agenda item. The next agenda item is item J2, discussion and possible action regarding fiscal year 2020-2021 budget adoption. We have Marnie Ruland, Finance Director.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. I put together a PowerPoint. Since you're so involved in the budget process, I thought I'd go ahead and update you on the budget that the City Council ended up adopting. We can go through the individual line items, and I'm sure you will recognize some of them as having been included in your letter, your recommendations to the council. Let's see. Let's do this. So their adoption included, of course, the budget response report corrections. Most of them weren't amounts. They were more presentation. I believe it added about $23,000 that we needed to take from the Major Facilities Reconstruction Fund. Council also adopted, instead of the vacant positions being deauthorized permanently, or at least until they were brought back for authorization, just keeping them vacant for 1 year, and then they come back into the core budget of next year. Same thing for the decision package of the mayor and city council's budget reduction. General pre-litigation matters for the city attorney's office. They added $150,000 for that. They also added $46,848, which I have to say I'm not sure how they came up with that amount, but that's how much they added for library materials, just one time. They also made a change to the number of hours, or I shouldn't say the number of hours, but the hours that the libraries will be open, remaining at the same number as the decision package recommended. 2 positions in public works were recommended for deauthorization, and the city council added them back. They're the senior park caretaker and the public works maintenance supervisor. Then one of your recommendations, and the reason we're here tonight, instead of including the Budget and Finance Commission with the recommendation to have commission meetings only every other month, Budget and Finance will meet monthly, and they added a cost of $3,600 to do that. Special event fee waivers, again, one of those items where they're only eliminating the fee waivers for 1 year instead of on an ongoing basis. And then again, for the internal audit services with Moss Adams. Recommended was a decision package for the waterfront to eliminate the falconer services, and the city council put back $57,000 for not the amount of service that we were previously getting, but a reduced amount of service, as opposed to eliminating it completely for a cost of $57,000. And in the waterfront as well, added 4 part-time positions for public works for the summer season. And then again, one of your recommendations was there was the decision package regarding a change to Harbor Patrol staffing, and they opted not to adopt that decision package. And I have repeated a couple, so we'll skip over those. Power plant property matter legal services. There was a decision package to add those to the general fund appropriations. Council opted instead to have that be funded by the Open Space Acquisition Fund. They added $25,000 for the phase 2 RCC dispatch feasibility study. And then all those actions required an additional $280,466 to be transferred from the Major Facilities Reconstruction Fund to the general fund to keep it in balance. Their adoption had a whole lot of directions to staff, things they would like brought back to them as reports. 2 of them affect the Budget and Finance Commission. One, as we've mentioned, is for you to review and analyze the Self-Insurance Program Fund. And then the Vehicle Life Cycle Policy will be included with your mid-year budget review. So just a quick look at the general fund. Proposed budget before decision packages had a deficit of $8.9 million that needed to be covered. And with a slight increase in revenues, about a $4 million reduction to appropriations, and then transfers in from the Capital Projects Fund that was recommended in a decision package, and the transfer in from the Major Facilities Reconstruction Fund. That, together with a minor change to the Transfers Act, left the general fund budget in balance. So to take a look at those appropriation cuts that were done between the proposed budget and the adopted budget, the majority of the cuts, as you can tell here, came from personnel. Of course, that's going to hurt around the organization, but it was required to get us in balance. And then about $600,000 in maintenance and operations, and a little bit in internal service fund allocations. The transfers, just to let you know what they are, included keeping those that were included in the core budget, and then incorporating those items that were in decision packages, and then, as previously mentioned, adding to the transfer from the Major Facilities Reconstruction Fund. Brought us to our transfers in amount. Transfers out didn't change materially, just the street landscaping and lighting subsidy, once all the decision packages and the budget response report correction brought that subsidy down a little bit. And we had expressed, when we discussed the budget with you, concerns also about the Harbor Tidelands and Harbor Uplands Fund and their operating deficits. And as you can see, the operating deficit decreased, but it far from went away. And Tidelands has a lot to do with the reductions, and just through the whole property management arrangement, we actually see that in revenues in Tidelands, and then appropriations really ends up with or offsetting that in revenues is the Seaside Lagoon. Harbor Uplands, a little more progress towards that, but again, a long ways to go. So progress though. And then if I could change what I'm sharing, stop that sharing. And I had mentioned in the admin report about OpenGov had some problems uploading the file, and they were able to, oops, wrong one. They were able to fix it today, and if I can find it, let's see, are we seeing that? No. Let's see. Open. No. Sorry about this. Okay, I'm not going to be able to. I'm not that good at sharing screen yet. But the information is there on OpenGov, and so you can take a look at the adopted budget. One of the things I was going to show you relates to kind of all your topics tonight, with the reductions in personnel, and it still includes the increase in the CalPERS unfunded liabilities. So those costs really impact us, and we needed to make even more personnel costs than we would have liked to. But I can answer any of your questions on the adopted budget. We will have a document put together, but it's going to be a while. It was going to be a while anyways, just because there's a lot of additional information that goes into that adopted document that's not in the proposed. But in addition, one of the positions cut was our analyst in financial services, our admin analyst, who historically has put together our document for us. So we'll be scrounging around doing that. We're going to try it in a different format and see what we can come up with. So earliest we would have that will be the end of September, but it may not be, just because of all the circumstances surrounding it. It may not be till the end of the calendar year. But the information there, like I said, is in OpenGov.
Thank you, Marnie. A question about, just for clarity's sake, the deficit, we covered a deficit of 8.9 million. That was in the general fund.
Right.
And then it was an additional 1.149 and 1.5 respectively in the uplands and the tidelands. Is that
right.
correct?
Yes.
And that deficit spending in the uplands and tidelands was connected to, amongst other things, the retention of the spots at the Harbor Patrol.
Yep.
Okay, so the council's election there was to deficit spend rather than cut somewhere else in order to cut.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, just for clarity's sake, thank you very much. Commissioner Conroy has a comment, please.
Yes, Marty, I was just curious. So I see where it says that the became monthly meetings for Budget and Finance Commission with an appropriation of $3,600. So I would assume that that's counts for 6 meetings or $600 per meeting. Is that to cover staff time or facilities, or how does that break out?
Primarily, it would be the person taking minutes for us and the person doing the video.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the commissioners? When it says on here, a limited mayor and city council budget reduction to 1 year, Marnie, I'm sorry, I'm not remembering what that was.
It was a variety of things. The talk mostly centered around conferences, training, meetings, and
Oh, okay. Per diems and out of town expenses and things like that?
yep.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from any of the commissioners? Any comments from the public, please?
Nope,
I have none. The Zoom, nope.
and no comments on e-comment as well. Just to let you know for the record too, that Commissioner Woodham rejoined the meeting at 7:33 PM.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for reconnecting. Absent any other comments, do we have a motion to receive and file this report?
So moved.
And a second? We'll do a roll call vote, please. Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Conroy?
Aye.
Commissioner Chun?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn?
Aye.
I vote yes as well. All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda are member items and referrals to staff. Go around the room and ask if any of the commission members have an item or referral. Commissioner Wynn, do you have anything?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Conroy?
Not at this time.
Commissioner Woodham?
No.
Commissioner Samples?
Not at this time, thanks.
Commissioner Chun?
None at this time.
I have nothing for the staff as well, which brings us to item L on our agenda, which is an adjournment, excuse me. Do we have a motion to adjourn to our next meeting of August 13th, 2020?
So moved.
And we'll do one last roll call vote around then. Commissioner Chun?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Conroy?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn?
Aye.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everyone. Until August 13th then.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vicky.
Good night.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good night.